Hi everyone. Today's episode is going to be a special episode of the Immigration Lawyers podcast intended for law students that are interested in the field of immigration law. It's going to be a multi-part series which discusses various aspects of preparing yourself to be in this field. In today's episode, the initial part will be about a question I get asked frequently when I visit with law students, and that is, what do you need to study for and how do you prepare to enter the field of immigration law? I hope you enjoy it. Thank you for listening to the first part of the Law Student Special Immigration Lawyers podcast. I'm the law school liaison for the Southern California American Immigration Lawyers Association, as well as being on the national committee for ILP. And through these activity, I've been able to meet with hundreds of law students over the last couple of years. And I've learned a lot about what law students think about the field and what their worries are and what their goals are. To start, I want to say as a disclaimer that everything I say today is my opinion and does not represent what the American Immigration Lawyers Association, either nationally or in Southern California, represent. It's all my personal opinion. But moving on from that, there is a lot of unknowns about what the immigration field entails for law students that are interested in the field. So I wanted to give a well-rounded explanation of what my view of this field is and what it requires, where it's going, and how to get involved in it. This part one series will talk about what you need to do to prepare for the field and to study for it. That's probably the number one question I get from law students. Now, the typical answer will be, we'll study immigration law in law school. However, a lot of immigration law courses in law schools focus on the history of immigration law almost as a political science or history course rather than the law itself. I've seen a lot of professors, which are awesome professors, but they don't necessarily practice in the field of immigration law actively, or they're focused on policy matters. So they don't talk about the day in and day out grind of actually being an immigration attorney. And that's what I want to do here. I also teach at Loyola Law School as an adjunct professor for immigration law, and I only teach a practical course, which is actually how to do a case and get a client. And as an additional disclaimer, I'm not representing Loyola Law School in this conversation. So when going to law school as a 2L or 3L where you're allowed to take electives, it would be good to take an immigration law course, whichever course it is. First of all, it'll give you an idea of what's going on in the field. Second, it'll introduce you to the professor and potential guest speakers, and it'll increase your network and knowledge of and relationships in the field. But just as importantly, you should focus on other areas that don't seem related to immigration law. For example, business associations or corporations courses are very key if you're going to practice in the employment or business-based immigration cases. Having an understanding of corporate formats, partnership agreements, agency law, all these are very helpful when you, for example, do E2 treaty trader investment cases, EB5 entrepreneur cases, and studying a business background or the company's operating agreement or structure when doing an L1 case or an EB1C case or potentially even EB2 or EB3. And in line with that, reviewing their tax documents, potentially understanding some basics of tax law could be helpful. Other than just the business cases, immigration touches upon all fields of a person's life. So having understanding of family law and marriage and divorce law will be helpful because marriage and divorce cases touch upon every aspect of immigration when you're thinking about marriage-based immigration or derivative status, when the spouse of a green card holder or a citizen is going to get a green card, when that marriage is actually happening, when it isn't, how the bigamy laws work, how cousin marriages work and if they're accepted, and so on. In addition, doing classes like trial advocacy or courtroom practice courses will be helpful if you're going to do immigration court hearings. Although immigration court hearings are much less formal than district court or state court hearings, being comfortable in speaking in front of a judge and in front of that audience, it could be very helpful. And there could be more, but another one to focus on is criminal law and having the ability to understand and interpret various criminal law statutes and how they would apply in the immigration law context. That's the extent that a law school curriculum could help you with the law school process. The next steps will be more practical. Many law schools, and they're growing now, have immigration law clinics where students could take part where a practitioner or a professor helps the student go through various types of immigration cases. These are usually humanitarian cases like asylum or TPS or T or U visas, as well as potentially immigration court hearings and helping people that don't have the income or the finances to be able to afford an attorney, but be able to get a law student with a practicing attorney as their mentor to guide them through the process. If you're going to be working in the immigration fields, humanitarian fields, the immigration court case area, then that's definitely a great way to get understanding and more comfort and confidence in dealing with those cases. In addition to that, one thing I recommend is students that are interested in immigration law, especially the removal or deportation area, is to go to these immigration courts. Usually the courts are open, so a person could just show up, walk into a courtroom and just sit in the back and watch the process happen. And through that, they'll get to know what the actual laws are, how the judges deal with the attorneys and the ICE attorneys, and what the roles are, what issues come up a lot, what rules or regulations get cited a lot, who the clerks are, who the judges are. It'll make you very comfortable with the arena you're going to be entering and what situations are happening. And moreover, if you do that frequently enough, the judge will notice you and get to know you. They might ask who you are and why you keep coming in, but not actually practicing in the court or being a defendant or an immigrant. And if you get to know the judge and your name, they see that you care enough to do this, that's always a good relationship and a good presence to have in that court, because the judge will remember that you actually, as a student, came in and cared enough about the field to come and watch and learn, rather than just entering when you needed to. There are also naturalization days and different immigration law days that come about in your community, and I would recommend joining various bar associations, either AILA or local ones, that set up, for example, naturalization days. And a lot of times ethnicity-based bar groups do this kind of stuff. Well, they'll have a naturalization or citizenship day. Well, they'll invite, for example, I remember going to one that was for Asian Americans, and they invited a lot of Asian American people, and we just sat down and helped each one go through their naturalization form. And if we saw there was some issues that were more difficult, we would refer to attorneys to get help. But for the most part, people that want to apply for citizenship shouldn't have that much difficulty, except for the language requirements, or not the language requirements, but the ability to fill out what is potentially a complex form for them. That'll help you learn how to speak with clients, everyday people coming in, how to deal with them, how to explain the process, which could be confusing to many people, how to get information out of them. One of the most important things and skills that you can learn as an attorney is how to ask the proper questions to get the proper answers out of the client. A lot of times, if you ask a direct question, most people are not able to give you a direct response back, and they go on tangents and over-explain unrelated topics. So you learn how to control the conversation and get the information you need, despite having clients that aren't always as cooperative. There's also internships and clerkships that you could do in law school, and this is a mixed bag. I've done a lot of internships when I was in law school, and for the most part, other than the name of the thing I did, it wasn't as helpful because the lawyers in charge were either too busy to get too involved, or sometimes the lawyers or people in charge of me actually just weren't doing their job. They didn't care. So if you are able to find an employer or internship coordinator that could actually help you out and really give you work and give you good feedback and will take the time to do that, then that's definitely a great opportunity, but they're difficult to come by. If you do get a good one, it's a great way to review the work and history of that firm by, for example, opening up old case files and studying what kind of cases they did and what issues happened, and to see live cases in action if the attorney lets you come into the first consultation and review the client and the documents and do the research with them. That could be worth a lot. Another way of getting to know immigration law really well is actually studying the law. And this can be kind of boring, and especially if you don't have an active case going on, it's hard to understand. For example, when I was still learning different areas of immigration law, and I wanted to prepare for what I was going to be doing potentially if a future client came in, I would go and read the statutes and the manuals to have an understanding. And that was good to get the basics of it. But one thing I realized after doing this several times is unless I have an actual case with facts that help me focus on what I'm looking for, just reading is very boring, and it doesn't stay in my head as well. So for example, if you're going to do an L visa, you could go and read the statute and what the regulations are, but it won't mean as much unless you have an actual client and have certain issues that they need to resolve within that field, in that area of immigration law. And then you go hunting down the regulation, and that's what makes it fun and makes it memorable and exciting to do. Having said those main areas of practically being an immigration attorney, there's two other things that are a little bit different for you to be able to become a good immigration attorney and really a good attorney in general. First of all, having cultural understanding. One worry a lot of my students have is if they don't speak a second language, that immigration law may not be for them. You know, I worked for another immigration attorney for a few years before I started my own practice, and this was an American gentleman that didn't speak any other language other than English, and he was practicing for almost 40 years and very established and respected with his clients. And the thing about it was, when people find an attorney that they like, they'll figure out a way to speak with them and communicate with them with translators or whatever way is necessary. So the language is not an issue, but having cultural understanding is. So having the ability to relate to your clients as they come in from different backgrounds is going to be very important. And people from different backgrounds all have different customs and different understanding and different use of language. And it's important to understand that and be able to adapt to that and make them comfortable. And that's what is important about cultural understanding in the immigration law field. And even in cases, for example, some countries are shy or have hesitation in admitting certain facts, you have to make them comfortable enough to do that, and know that in some countries they'll say yes when they mean no, and you just got to be able to understand that and be able to work with them to get the true answer. So I guess some countries in Asia, for example, it's hard to get a client to say no or a negative thing because that's on their culture, say negative things or to bring up a topic like that. So they'll say yes when they don't need to say yes when the answer is no. And it's important to talk to them about that and understand that this kind of stuff exists so that you get the real information out. That's why having cultural understanding, studying different countries, studying cultures, having friends from a lot of different areas of the world, and learning how their family act and talk and how they react to each other is going to be very helpful to be a really good immigration attorney that deals with people from all across the world. And finally, there's one more thing that I talk about a lot. I'm going to try to discuss in the other parts as well, is when people think about entering the field of immigration law, how to study for it, how to prepare for it, they think about, the law and like the networking aspect and finding the job and your resume and all that kind of stuff. But to me, one thing I've realized, and I was lucky to realize it a few years ago and it changed my life, is more important than all this stuff is studying to become the best person that you are and striving for excellence. So, a lot of people want to study all day and get straight A's. That's all good, but always remember in addition to the intelligence quotient, there's a need for emotional intelligence. And the way you get emotional intelligence, which is very important for getting clients and getting clients to trust you and having good relationships and just being happy with who you are. Because you could be a successful attorney monetarily with a lot of clients and you could hate yourself. And unfortunately in the field, we see actually suicides and stuff like that happen with attorneys that you wouldn't even expect, because you see how gifted they are in their craft and how well they're doing financially. But taking time aside to really analyzing who you are in yourself and becoming comfortable with who you are, which creates confidence, and just relaxing and enjoying each second of it will help you be a better person and a better lawyer. So one thing to do is try to get these self-help books that could help you better understand who you are and what drives you and why you act in certain ways. One thing I've realized is that people, when they're growing up, go through certain things in their life, and everyone goes through different and various issues coming up. And when we're a kid and we have these issues that pop up, we have a certain understanding of the world that's limited and it's not very intelligent. And we do certain reactions and create certain behaviors to deal with them. And then we grow older. And what I see in a lot of people is they keep those learned behaviors as they grow older and they never re-examine them. And these end up becoming a big problem for them later in life because they keep repeating this behavior that's based on a insufficient understanding of the world. So, something happens to you when you're a kid, you act in a certain way that may be antisocial or not be proper, and you get older and you keep acting that way. But what you got to do is go back and think about what happened and think, well, now that I have more education, more experience, I'm older, how would I have treated that situation differently so that I would have came out of it better? And constantly reanalyze this. And that's something I do at least on a yearly basis when I look back at things, but definitely even on a daily basis with my relationships, my family, my wife, my friends. And I always look back in clients, could I have said this a little better and this outcome could have been better? And really look hard and understand that you're going to make mistakes, and it's not a bad thing that you made a mistake, and you're not a bad person, and you're not going to be going to hell or anything like that. It's just go back and look at who you are and what you're doing and analyze it and know, like, if you made a mistake, it's sometimes painful reliving a mistake or focusing on that. It's embarrassing. It's a deep feeling of shame sometimes. But it's better to feel that feeling of shame and to get over that issue and learn not to repeat it rather than to keep repeating it by avoiding the issue. And I see people sometimes double down when they realize they're doing something wrong. Instead of looking at it for what it is and trying to make it better, they just keep doing it and they double down and they think that by just being arrogant about it and just pushing ahead, they're doing the right thing. They don't have to reopen that wound of the error they're making. So I've talked about this in generalities and kind of vague, but I'm sure in your own lives you could take it, and then maybe in future episodes in podcasts, I'll use more detailed examples, try to use more personal examples. I guess one in my life would be when I was thinking about this over the weekend, actually. When I was around like 20 or 21, now that I look back at it, I was kind of an annoying kind of person. I would talk a lot and say kind of goofy things that might offend people and bother people. And one day, we were with my friends and we were sitting around. I just bought a video camera, some sort of digital video camera, and I just put it on the side to record us. So I'm like, okay, we'll record one day in our lives for posterity. And when I went back and reviewed it a few days later with my friends, we put on the television and watched, I realized I talked a lot, and I talked about a lot of stuff that was nonsense or embarrassing or offensive, and it really hit me. I'm like, oh, that's how I sound in front of people. And from my perspective, just looking into the world, I would never hear myself or see myself what I'd say. But taking as a third party, viewing myself in the past saying it, it really opened my eyes to really how my behavior was and how it should be better. And and that striving for excellence, that wasn't excellence, and I needed to up my game up and take it to the next level. And that was really key to opening my eyes to this idea of looking back and reanalyzing what you've done based on additional information, based on maturity, based on more experience, and to just to make it better. And if you do that, even on a small scale, you can see your life grow exponentially. Imagine doing every year a little bit. Eventually, these things become exponential, and in your life and your practice grow, and your relationships grow, and you could become very respected and admired in your community. And that's a really important place to be as we get older, to really be an example for other people and to help them and to bring them up as well as much as possible. So if there's anything, for example, I could do to help people, I try to do my best and just put myself out there. And that's what this podcast series is about. I hope you enjoyed part one. Please email me if you have any questions. My email is info@jqqlaw.com. The podcast is the Immigration Lawyers Podcast. And feel free to leave comments on the YouTube page and like us on our Apple iTunes page. Until next time, bye-bye.